Does this screen look familiar? I know it does because it's the place you go when you are done with the presentation and you want to make a handout. You know what I'm talking about. It's that print options in PowerPoint, the 3 slides per page with lines. Yeah, you know the one. Well, it's time to stop using that option forever. After watching this video, I want you to never again choose that option for your handout. In today's video, you are going to learn why this design is so terrible. You're going to learn 3 alternatives to that handout design, and you're even going to learn 2 options that you should avoid when you're trying to make handouts. Just in case you're new to this channel, hello, I'm Dr. Echo Rivera, and I help people who share data create engaging presentations. And I do that through my professional development options. I do group workshops, I run online courses, and I have videos like these. So if that sounds good, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you get future videos, and check out some links in the description below about how I can help you. Okay, so you are here watching this video because you need to create presentation handouts at some point. So class lectures, training workshops, conference presentations, we are generally expected and should provide some type of written material or handout to those in our audience. So let's get started by talking about why this design is really not that great and should not be the standard go-to handout that we are using. Okay. To understand why this design is so bad, we need to take a very quick moment just to get on the same page about the purpose of a handout. So, an effective handout is one that works as a reference for later on. I mean, that's probably the main purpose of a handout, right? But a good handout also does things like provides the audience with structure and space to take notes. That's helpful for their learning. It helps them stay engaged. And if done really well, it can actually become almost like a written guide or a visual structure for how all the information, all those slides in your presentation fit together. And finally, maybe with a little extra effort, a handout can be a great tool to just in general keep your audience engaged from start to finish through the entire presentation. Yes, it is possible for a handout to meet all of these goals. And basically, we've just created a helpful little checklist for us that we can use to evaluate different handout designs. So let's get started with the standard three slides per page with lines handout. That is kind of a tongue twister. Okay, so do these work as a reference for later on? Well, your immediate thought was probably, yes, Echo, that's why we use them. But let's take a trip down memory lane together. Okay, has this ever happened to you? It's some period of time after a lecture or a conference presentation, and you dig out your handout because you're thinking, oh good, I'll be able to use it as a reference. I need something that was mentioned in that lecture or that conference presentation. I need to review for my exam or get a citation, whatever it is. And you finally dig it out of your, backpack or filing cabinet, wherever it is. And then you go, oh, wait, it's so pixelated and so small that I would need a microscope to read this. Ah, has this ever happened to you? I know it has happened to me all the time. So in that case, does that actually work as a reference later on? No, it does not. And here's the twist. I know this video is about presentation handouts, but we can't talk about presentation handouts if we don't talk about slide design, because that problem is not actually PowerPoint's fault. It's actually a problem with the slides themselves. So if the presentation is this status quo, text-heavy kind of presentation that is everywhere in our field, or even if it's just slightly better than average, it has things like smart art and design templates, okay? If the presentation has stuff like that, there is no way that those thumbnails are going to work in a handout. They're just always going to be unreadable and unusable. On the other hand, if your presentation is significantly better than average, meaning it is actually visually engaging and effective, then these handouts could actually become readable. these are all tiny thumbnails of a thumbnail. So let's take a closer look at what I'm talking about here, okay? So this might depend on if you're watching this on your phone or a small screen versus a computer, but you should be able to actually read the words in those thumbnails now. And this is a sample of slides from my presentation skills training where I am practicing what I teach, visually engaging and effective. At least I'm, trying to get there. Now, this is what most people are doing, lots of text crammed on a slide, tiny font sizes, not visually engaging. There is no chance anybody could ever read that without a microscope. And let's be honest, even then that wouldn't work because it's just the quality of the thumbnail itself. It's too blurry, it's too pixelated. So it really could never work with the standard presentations that we are used to seeing, also known as death by PowerPoint. So does this handout format work as a reference for later? For now, I'm just going to put a question mark to symbolize that it depends, because it depends on the quality of the slides themselves, okay? So what about the next piece here? The structure and the space to take notes. Let's do a deep dive on that together. So you see some lines here next to the thumbnail. So I bet you are tempted to once again say, yes, like what more structure do you need, Echo? Literal lines for notes. I hear you. And I'm going to burst that little bubble and challenge that because first of all, in my opinion, the design of the line itself fails to allow for meaningful note-taking for most people. Like the line, it just isn't long enough. There's wasted space on each side of the line, and the line spacing itself is just, I don't know, kind of depends on your handwriting, but yeah. So I just feel like there's some problems with the actual design of those lines. But I kind of geek out over design stuff, so that's why I pick up on these things. And, what about you? Have you ever struggled to actually fit all the notes you wanted to take for that slide in those lines? I mean, from what I've heard from other people, it's a pretty common struggle. The other problem is you actually kind of have two zones for note taking. You have the lines and then you have this long blank space, and they're two shapes, one's a square, one's a long rectangle. It just makes it awkward in terms of having that space and structure to take notes. You don't really know what to put where. It just becomes kind of a mess. And then, okay, you're gonna think I'm totally weird for this, and that is totally fair, but I swear this is the thing. There also becomes a problem with contrast. So most of us were writing with something like a black pen, for example, and when we write our notes and then go back to it later, there's no contrast between our notes and those lines because those lines are just really thick and dark. And it just becomes harder to really actually use your notes as a reference because of that contrast problem. So, one of these things isn't necessarily a deal breaker, but when we look at the impact of all three of them together, our notes kind of turn into a hot mess, okay? So I don't know, what do your notes look like when you use this? I know that if I pulled this out 6 months later, I would look at this and be like, you know what? I don't need this information that badly anymore. And there it goes in the recycling bin. So that's sort of the impact of all of these problems put together. And I know it's really easy to blame the note taker and to say, well, if you would just write neater or smaller or just learn how to take notes, you wouldn't have a problem. Long sigh. I don't know if that picked up on the microphone, but look, that's not really the attitude that's going to help you connect with your audience and make an impact with your presentation, because making an impact is that connection, and it's sort of setting your audience up to succeed in making it easy for them. Whereas something like this kind of sets them up to fail. And if their notes work, it's in spite of the structure, not because of the structure. So, you're here watching this video because you want to create better presentations. So I encourage more of a thought process of you want to make it easy for them and to make them enjoy the experience of note taking. I do feel like you would have to literally take a class in how to even just cope with this. So, okay, let's move on. So no, this layout does not help provide a structure and space for people to take notes. And finally, in no world is a handout like this going to keep people engaged. We all know this. We've never found this handout to be interesting or engaging, so I don't think that's a surprise. So here's the final breakdown. Basically, that first item about whether it works as a reference will entirely depend on whether your presentation itself is effective or not. The correct font sizes, correct amount of information per slide, correct number of slides, things like that. But even if that is the case, it is not checking all of the boxes. It does not check the other two boxes, which are important. So that is why there are some major flaws with this design and why I am hoping you will use some of the alternatives instead of this design, because it just sets your audience up to fail. It does not support your audience in following along with your presentation, and it doesn't help them use the information later on, and it is not engaging. So what should you do instead? Let's talk about the 3 alternatives to this handout. This first option is so easy. You are going to love it. All you have to do is choose a different option when printing or saving your handout as a PDF. All you have to do is go here, same place, but instead of 3 slides per page with notes, click that little down arrow and choose something else. What do you choose? You choose either 4 slides per page or 6 slides per page. 4 slides per page is probably the safest option, but it will depend on how visual your slides are. If they are highly visual, highly effective, you can probably do the 6 slides per page. And then in the settings, before you print or save it, you just need to change one setting. Remove the slide numbers underneath each thumbnail. When you start having more effective slides, the whole page number thing becomes unnecessary, irrelevant, and unhelpful. You will probably be able to stop using them. That is kind of the goal, but that could be a whole other video one day. So that's my recommendation. But if you really want those slide numbers on there, you can leave them. That's okay. But that's it. That's option 1. Now, you probably already caught this, but there is a catch. If your presentation is that standard status quo, then it's not going to work as an option for your handout. This option still only will help if your presentations are effective and engaging and meet those minimum slide design basics I keep hinting at. High font size, correct number of slides, things like that. So our checklist looks very similar so far to what we've talked about. So it will work as a reference for later for effective presentations, but it still won't if the presentation itself has not been improved. So why is it better than the 3 slides per page with lines? Well, it's better because the note-taking will be a little bit better. Let's take a look together. So each slide has its own space and there's no lines to get in the way. There's none of that awkward design where the line is a little too short, the line spacing isn't, correct for everybody's size handwriting. So it just kind of having just that blank space actually gives us more of that flexibility when taking notes. We don't have lines getting in the way. We're not fighting with any lines. Also, there is only one zone to take notes. We don't have a combination of part of it is lines, part of it is blank space. It's just all blank space. And that really is giving us that flexibility that we need to take notes in the way that works for us, works for your audience. And of course, that contrast issue I was talking about, we're not going to run into that because when people come and look at their notes later on, they're just going to see their handwritten notes. They're not going to have to sort of look at other ink that is, basically the same level of contrast with their handwritten notes. Okay. So it is an improvement for note taking, and it is an improvement regardless of the slide design itself. So that's nice. Now, it's not going to be an engaging handout, but again, especially if you've improved your slide design, you've now checked off 2 of the 3 boxes. And even if you haven't, we've at least checked one box where it will be a little bit easier for people to take notes. So, a step in the right direction. So especially if you have been improving your slide design already, hopefully you are like, sweet, okay, I could totally use this as an option. Yay. And I do really think this is a great handout when you are in a pinch and have like no time at all. Okay. It's great for when it's a low stakes presentation, like a lab meeting or something like that, or you're only giving this presentation once in your life. You know, it's kind of an outlier to what you normally do, maybe a special guest lecture or something like that. So yeah, don't spend a lot of time on the handout. You don't need to in those cases. I also think this is a great option if it's the first time you are presenting new material and you're still working out the content. You don't really want to spend a lot of time on a handout if the content itself isn't pretty solid or mostly finished. So this is a great option for these situations. But I'm sorry. There are some downsides to this handout. And, you know, if you're going to use these, I just feel like it's my responsibility to make you aware of the downsides. So first, editing the header and the footer is super annoying. Like, you actually have to use an option I'm going to tell you later to avoid. You kind of have to like go in there to edit the header and footer. And yeah, so you're probably not going to do it, which means the header is just going to be this like super generic date. I think that's the default. It's just the date. Very run of the mill. You know, this isn't something that is that professional or nice. So yeah, the header and the footer are kind of not great. The handout, as all of these options do, just literally start with the first slide, which is the title slide, and that's it. And we also have this like, you know, even on that first page, we have all this blank space above that. There's just nothing special about it. It's so impersonal. And in my opinion, it lacks this level of professionalism that some of our presentations really need to have. Something important like a conference presentation, a keynote, or something like that. I mean, this really isn't sort of setting the impression of ourselves that I think we want to. You know, maybe your undergrad students won't care. That's debatable, but again, if you're doing like a conference presentation or a keynote and you really want to sort of set yourself apart and set yourself up for networking and making a good impression, this is not going to do that. The other problem is every single slide gets put on the handout, even if you hide them first. Okay, so I'm curious if anybody has done this before, but before making this video, I could have sworn if you hid the slides, they wouldn't show up when you go to print using this feature. I could have sworn that happened in the past, but I tested it before making this video and it didn't work. The slides that I hid were still showing up in the handouts. I don't know what's going on, but that told me that basically this is very inconsistent and that inconsistently works. And basically all I could do was go in and literally specify the slides I wanted to show up in the handout. So I'd have to type like 1 through 15, 17 through 35, you know, like, and memorize all that. No. Okay. No. Now, if you get what I'm saying, you're like, oh yeah, that's annoying. But I know some of you watching this video are like, what are you even talking about? Why would you not want every single slide in your handout? Okay. That question is totally a sign that you have too few slides in your presentation and a presentation that's probably difficult to follow. Please take my free training linked below so you can start to see a different way of presenting. So that's all I'm going to say. But if you're already in my training and if you've already started to improve your slides, you will totally get why you don't need every single slide in your handout. All right, let's move on. The other downside is that you can't do anything about any of this because there's effectively no customization options. You cannot fix these issues. Plus, you won't be able to use handouts to address concerns or provide accommodations like you can if you use options 2 and 3. So what you end up with is ultimately every single slide and just slide after slide. There's just no organization to it. There's no customization. There's no polished look to your handout. It's just a data dump of all of your slides. And as you start creating better presentations that are more visual and are more effective, you are going to hit a wall with this really fast. So here's just kind of an example of one thing I mean. So what you're going to end up with is this really, 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 really long handout with a lot of wasted space because it's every single slide. And, your presentation is going to have kind of an ebb and flow to it where people will only need to take notes on certain slides. So your participants are going to end up with a situation where their handouts might look something like this. Again, all this wasted space. It feels very unbalanced and doesn't really contribute to a positive experience in terms of note taking and following along or using it as a reference later on for your participants. So yes, option 1 definitely has some pros and cons. It is a great option to have in your back pocket for those situations that I was talking about. But we need to talk about options 2 and 3 because those are going to literally solve all of those downsides. Option 2 is where you're going to use Google Docs or Word to create your handout. When you use Word, Microsoft Word, or Google Docs, you will unlock a whole new level of customization and professionalism for your handout that you probably never even thought was possible. And this is what will help you create these really nice, professional, sleek handouts that your audience will never want to throw away because they just love having them and using them as a reference. It's so easy to do this. You can literally just copy a slide from PowerPoint and paste it into Word as a picture, and then you basically just build your own handout. You do whatever you need to do using all the features in Word you are familiar with. Text styling, like headings, font colors, font sizes, bolding. You can use shapes. You can use that wrapping text around images feature, and you can do things like add borders to images, change the color of a border, resize images without distorting them. And this mostly works in Google Docs too. So that's perfect if you want to share your handout with a link. Here is an example of a handout that I created in Word. I was able to add structure and organization to the handout. I do things like add in my own section headers, which is literally just like text with a background color. Nothing fancy. Photoshop was not needed. But that way I can add organization to my notes to help the audience know which slides belong in which category. And I get to be selective. It is not every single slide. I get to choose the best slides, the ones that will actually work as a reference for later on, the ones that the audience actually needs in their handouts. Okay, and that's just all I do is copy and paste the ones I need. Super easy, and there's no wasted space when I do that. And they aren't all just the exact same size with the exact same layout either. I get to do things like, well, in this example, they are all the exact same size, but you're going to see some where I actually did change it up a little bit. But still, I was able to choose the size I wanted, and they are a little bit bigger than the ones in the standard print PowerPoint print options. And hopefully you've checked out my other video where I talked about scripting and practicing your presentations, because one of the advantages is when you do that is then you can do things like you already have your notes in the slides. You can just copy and paste those, maybe format them a little bit, and then you can add even more information for the audience and have that waiting for them. So that's less notes that they're maybe scrambling to take. It's less stressful for them. You already have some key stuff in there, and it's a much more enjoyable experience for them as well. But you have control over that, whether you're going to do that or not. And it's just in Word, so it's just copy, paste, and reformat. Plus, like I said earlier, there's something so generic and bland about the standard print options in terms of the header, the footer, and that wasted space on the first page before the first slide. So if you hop into Word and do this, then you get to customize it and just make it a little bit more professional and special. You can tailor it to that situation. So for example, what I do for my training workshops is I'll usually have like a photo, maybe just a welcome message and a little note before we begin the workshop. And it just creates this, just this like custom experience that your audience will really appreciate. I have also used this space to put things like a contact information. It's also where you can put a URL that you want your audience to know about. So for example, if you're doing a paper presentation or a conference presentation about an article or a report, we'll put that URL or information about how they can find the full report or the publication. You could just in general make this feel like a very custom experience that you are prepared for and it wasn't done at the last second. That's kind of how those print options from PowerPoint can make things feel. Like this was kind of rushed and finished at the last second, whereas this definitely feels like you've really put time and effort into your presentation and you want it to be a positive experience for your audience, which is a win-win for everybody. And because you are choosing what slides go into the handout, and you could do things like resize and reformat them, each page can actually be customized to fit how much space the participants will need to take notes. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where you can do things like resize the images. So, it's really nothing super complicated. It's actually very easy to do. You're just choosing your best slides, the ones that have information that will be helpful as a reference for later on. And then you size them and place them appropriately. So if you do still have sort of standard presentations with lots of text on a slide, well, then this is actually a helpful option because then you can put it into Word and make it big. And then people can actually still read it. And they will really appreciate that you took the time to do that so that at least the handout is something that they can use later on. This is also helpful if you want to do things like keep certain segments together and group your slides. Again, it just helps with that organization so that when they're looking at your handout later on, they actually see how the slides fit together. Right? That's like another problem with the standard 4 slides per page layout. Every single slide looks the same. So there is none of that organization. And that's the type of thing we tend to forget or lose later on because we typically don't take notes on that kind of thing, but build it into your handout and it will help your audience a lot. So let's sum it up. This option works perfectly as a reference for later. And because you can make those slide images really big, it works even if you do have a lot of text on a single slide. And your audience will extra appreciate that at least the handout is something they can read. Because you can customize it and all of those things we just talked about, you can make sure that it does have a good structure and space for them to take notes. And you could do it in a way where it's not going to be a lot of wasted space in the handout and you've grouped items together and it's just really going to be appreciated by your audience. And because it's so much more customized and it doesn't look like that generic PowerPoint print option, it's going to be engaging and your audience will enjoy it. So win-win all around. And here's the best part. Once you've done option 2, then you just need to make a few adjustments to get to option 3, because option 3 is literally the same thing, but you just spend more time to make them interactive and useful, aka fancy. Fancy is my favorite word if you don't know. All right, let's take a look at this example here. Made in Word. And this is from my online course and it's an activity from the course. So the idea for this handout is that, in the video, they're going to see this slide and look how big I made it. It's not just a tiny little thumbnail in the corner, right? It's like the full page, very nice and big and easy to see. And then of course, this corresponds to the video, but there's, the instructions I mentioned in the video. I've also put them there with like a nice little icon to indicate, yes, you need to write something down now. And then I used a gray shape so that they did have the space to write down their answer. And the answer is shown on the next page. And I really don't want to give any spoilers. And so I created a little, there's like a little icon there and I used it because PowerPoint and Word have nice icons. So I use this in a little text box that's like, hold on, don't turn the page until you're done because the answer is on the next page. So this is, again, all done in Word and it's so fun. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from people who take my course about these handouts. And yes, that means even professionals enjoy interactive, fun handouts like this in the right context. Like, don't do this for a job talk. Okay, like just don't. And something like this is probably a bit much for like a conference presentation, even. But a class lecture, this would be very fun, I think. Okay. This is also how you can do things like create fill in the blanks. So I did a video collaboration with Dr. Barbie Honeycutt. We've done quite a few things together. One was even an interview on her podcast, and we were talking about these kind of handouts and notes, and she calls them guided notes. And so basically you have most of the sentence there and then just like a blank line where they have to sort of fill in the answer. So again, it's a great way just to kind of keep them engaged because they know they need to like fill in the answer. They need to fill in the blank. So that's the type of thing you can do at this stage too for option 3, is to kind of go through some of the notes that you have, delete some words here and there, and replace it with an underscore, a long underscore. That's it. That's all you have to do to create guided notes. All in Word, super easy. You can do so many cool things to make your handouts significantly more engaging and interactive and memorable and effective. So here's another example. There is an activity in my course where people learn a scale called the Ban All That Text scale. It's a rating system to help you know whether you have too much text on your slides, which literally everybody does. That's the biggest problem with standard presentations. So, I wanted to make it fun to learn how to get some of that text off the slides. So it's basically just a fun, kind of silly rating system. And we do an activity where they see a slide and have to guess the BATS score. And so the first page on the handout is where they can write that down. So I have instructions on the handout and a video to guide them through it. And then, for each slide, I've sort of put the scale options there so they can just circle what their guess is. And then on the next page, I have pretty much the exact same thing, but then this is where, while we're going through the answers, they can actually just mark what the correct answer is. So that's just, one more example. Basically, the sky is the limit in terms of how you can use option 3. These are just some examples, and I really just wanted to show you that you can create handouts like this in Word. And, if you're really good at using Google Docs, I'm sure a lot of this is possible in Google Docs as well. I don't talk about it as much just because I'm more familiar with Word and not as familiar with Google Docs. But if you are loving Google Docs and you can already see how you can do it in there, go for it. So this is why option 3 checks all of these boxes too, because it's basically option 1, but just with, more effort and with a higher level of impact. Okay, so almost everybody at this point has kind of the exact same reaction, which is like, Echo, you're ridiculous. I do not have time for this. Okay, I hear you. And I have 4 responses for you. First, that's why I showed you option 1. Like, I showed you an option. It takes literally no extra time to complete. So if you don't have time, do option 1. That is why I shared it with you. Yes, there are some downsides. Of course there are. But I wouldn't tell you to use option 1 if it was total garbage. Okay, I wouldn't do that to you. So it is at least a little better than the 3 slides per page with lines. So there you go, option 1. Second, I'd be willing to bet that option 2 takes less time than you're thinking. I can't actually read your mind. I don't know how long you're thinking it could take, but when I talk to people about this and they experience it the first time, quite a few of them will say things like, oh, that actually wasn't too bad. And again, you have control over what you're doing. I mean, the first time you do option 2, you could literally just be copying and pasting the best slides, resizing them a little bit, and then that's it. And then maybe the next time you do option 2, you do things like, okay, now I'm going to add a few more notes, or, like I'm going to like copy and paste some of my notes, add some text to it, things like that. So, you do actually have more control than you might think as well. Okay. And finally, I just wanted to validate that, yes, it is going to take some extra time to do option 2, and it's going to take a lot of time to do option 3. Absolutely. So maybe the question is more, is it worth it to take that extra time? Well, let me talk about some benefits of taking the time to do options 2 and 3. First of all, it is going to be a way you can make a much better first impression. So, if you are at a conference and you really want to be there to show up as a professional and to use it as a networking opportunity and really get your name out there and get your research out there, options 2 and 3 are definitely going to do that more than option 1, and definitely more than the 3-page per slide with lines. So it's a really good way to set that good impression. Options 2 and 3 are also more accessible, and that customization will help you do certain accommodations. We didn't talk about that in this video because I'm planning on a whole video just about this, just about accessibility and accommodations. But just as a heads up, in that video, I'm going to say, watch my handout video, because options 2 and options 3 are how you're going to do this type of accommodation, or why this is going to be accessible. So you kind of already have a head start with that. The other benefit is that your audience is going to appreciate it, and they're going to be more likely to use it as a reference later on. And just in general, this is something that's going to be good for your reputation, and it's going to be something that is good for your audience. Like, it's just kind of a win-win. And one thing that I've really seen, not only in myself, but in clients that I work with, is that creating better handouts creates this like positive feedback loop with your presentation quality. Because in a way, the only reason I'm able to make my handouts so interactive or fancy is because the presentation itself has met sort of a certain level of interactivity and high quality. And they just kind of like feed into each other. And so you'll start to notice that even while you're creating your presentation, you might be thinking about your handout and how you can make your handout engaging, and that will actually make your slide more engaging. And then as you work on your handout, you might think, oh, I wish I did this in my presentation, so this part would be easier to take notes, and then you improve your presentation. Like, that actually has these really wonderful ripple effects that, and I just wanted to mention that just so you knew that that was in your future. And just in general, having that power to customize your handout addresses a lot of different concerns that people have about creating more visual presentations. So, I just hear all sorts of concerns. Like, what if my students are used to text-heavy slides? What if my audience is multilingual? What if my professional audience expects to see all the data, all the text, all the things, like all here at once? Well, having a good custom handout can actually let you address some of those, but that's something I talk about more in my training. And finally, my most important point of all, which I actually kind of hinted to already, but let's just bring it out here. It's not really a matter of which one you choose, option 1 or option 2 or option 3. Instead of thinking this as an or situation, think of it as the order. Ooh. So what I mean by that is the first time you are giving that presentation, you spent so much time creating it from scratch. Do yourself a favor and use option 1, okay? And then maybe the 2nd through 5th time you give that presentation, that's where you stay in option 2. Again, kind of like what I was talking about, like even the first time you do option 2, just get your best slides on there and resize them, leave some space for notes, and move on with your life. But then maybe you add a little bit more to that, maybe some shapes to take notes or something like that, some notes from your notes. Okay, so you can even kind of stay there and just do little improvements over time. And then if you are really giving this presentation a lot and it's something like a training, then that's when you can think about option 3, because you're like, the content is solid. I'm not really going to change it much. So I'm going to turn it into this like amazing option 3, super interactive kind of thing. This is particularly useful if you are teaching an online course. So if a lot of your undergrad classes or grad classes have moved online, or some of them have moved online, then you spend a lot of time creating your video. So use option 1 the first time you create your class lecture. But then over time, and when you are done with that video and you know that video itself is solid and you're not going to have to change it for a while, well, then you can focus on improving the handout, that kind of thing. All right. So Basically, my point is so many people are worried that when they come to me for training, that I'm going to tell them they must have the most beautiful slides for every single slide in every single presentation, and they must do option 3 for every single presentation ever. Absolutely not. No, I'm always recommending that you implement strategies in waves or phases. I've sometimes called it a phased praxis approach when I want to sound fancy. So you can do it in stages. This is a concept I talk about in my free training, the idea that you're always setting yourself up for success so that you can just take things one step further each time you give a presentation. You don't go from 0 to 10 right away, and you don't go from 0 to 10 for every single presentation. It's not realistic and it's not sustainable. So take a look at that free training. The link to it is down below, and hopefully that addresses your concerns about the time it takes to do this. I think we are both ready to move on, aren't we? Now you know the 3 best alternatives to that standard handout option. And now I want to take some time to talk about 2 options that I recommend you don't use. These are both features in PowerPoint that you will probably come across, so I knew I had to talk about them. The first is called the Handout Master in PowerPoint. This is where you are supposed to be able to go in and edit the basics of a handout template. This is where you can delete the date at the top. This is where you can remove the page number on the bottom right, which you wouldn't do. The first is called the Handout Master in PowerPoint. This is where you're supposed to be able to go in and edit the basics of a handout template. This is where you can delete that annoying date at the top right. That is a good thing to do. This is how you go in and edit the header. I was talking about that earlier and how it's annoying. This is where you have to go to do it, which is why most people aren't. You could do things again, like edit the footer, which you should do. And you can do things like delete the page number on the bottom right. You shouldn't do that because page numbers on your handout are very good. But beyond that, there's not much you could do to make these handouts better. For example, here is the master template for the 3 slides per page with lines. How awesome would it be if I could just fix those lines and then we could use that? Like I would maybe make them like a super light gray. Maybe I would, do something like add shapes to give people the space that they need to write the notes, right? So I was like, okay, I'll be clever and just put shapes over the lines and hide them. And then we can use this. Oh, Echo, you're so smart. You hacked PowerPoint. Yay. No, I did not hack PowerPoint because this is what it looks like when you go to print. It looks even more ridiculous than it did before. So yeah, that's just one example. I've spent quite a bit of time trying to sort of hack this and make this work. Let me just tell you, it doesn't even come close to what we can do in option 2, definitely not option 3. So honestly, I recommend just avoid the Handout Master altogether unless you're doing option 1 and you want to edit the header and the footer. There you go. That's it. The other feature that you are probably going to come across in PowerPoint and get excited about only to be disappointed, which is literally what happened to me. I even used to recommend this as a good option, but I don't anymore. Here's why. Okay, basically this is an export, not print. So you go to export and you'll see this like seemingly perfect option called create handouts. And then what it does is it's going to send your slides to Word so you can create custom handout. Sounds a little bit like options 2 and 3, doesn't it? Well, look at that. So at first you might be perfect. Now I don't have to copy and paste my slides because I can basically just click create handouts. There's a pop-up with a few different options. And let me just go ahead and show you the lines next to slides options. Okay, so here's what it looks like. Looks familiar, doesn't it? It's basically 3 slides per page with lines, but we can customize it now. At least that's the idea. So you could do things like, again, the slide numbers literally have their own, I forgot to mention, what happens is when it goes into Word, this is a table. So it's 3 columns. That's how they do that. So, okay, literally a whole column, all this space is dedicated to the slide number. I do not get this. We don't want that. So we can just delete that column and that makes our life easier. So great. And then we want to maybe keep the column for the lines, but delete them so we can replace them with our own formatting. So I was like, okay, off to a good start. I'm liking what I'm seeing. Here we go. All right. So I cleaned it up, got rid of those slide numbers and just deleted the lines. And so now we have a table of 2 columns, basically, and we have a cleaner look already. All right. So off to a good start. And then here is where everything just goes downhill. We pretty much can't effectively do anything else. The best I could do was create one long shape. So just like here's like one big giant space for taking notes. And I actually think, okay, this looks kind of nice. I feel like we could work with this. But then I started doing things like, okay, let me try to increase the size of those images and adjust the spacing. And then it just kind of like broke on me. It was so glitchy. It wasn't working. Or I would do one thing, and I have a pretty fast computer. I would, increase the size of the column and it would just like freeze. And so it was honestly awful to work with. And it's so much easier and faster to just use Word the way I was talking about, where you copy and paste slides into Word. So and the other thing is that when it's exporting from PowerPoint to Word, it takes forever and you cannot do anything. Like you literally like don't even look at your computer. Just like hit the button to create handouts and walk away and come back like 10 minutes later. Because if you so much as like breathe on your computer or click anything on your computer while it's exporting, you get an error message and it like cancels the whole thing and you literally have to start over. And it's just like, it is a really frustrating experience. And if you do this, you won't want to create custom handouts. Whereas option 2 is so much easier and so much faster. So that is why I recommend you avoid this option. Okay, there you go. I bet you didn't think someone could talk so long about presentation handouts, but here we are. I truly hope that you found this video to be helpful and that it will help you not only create better handouts, but also better presentations. And if that's what you're interested in, and if you've been wanting to make better presentations, but you feel stuck, you're not really sure why things aren't getting better, or you're not even sure how to move forward, and I am here to get those gears moving. If you are an academic, researcher, evaluator, TTA provider, federal or state staff, I am here to help you share your data in effective and engaging ways. Check out my free training below where you will learn about the 6 gears of creating engaging presentations. And at the very end of that video, you will learn a little bit about my presentation skills masterclass training program. Now, everybody asks me, what do I use to create my videos? I just use PowerPoint, friends. People hate PowerPoint. They think PowerPoint is awful, and they shouldn't. PowerPoint is not the problem. The presentation itself is the problem. Literally everything that you saw was made in PowerPoint, except for the GIFs. I didn't make those in PowerPoint. I found those online, but but pretty much everything else. I'm not using Adobe. I'm not using Photoshop. I'm not using anything special. Just good old PowerPoint. So hopefully this video can also serve as an example of how PowerPoint really can be used to create effective and engaging presentations. And I show you how to create effective and engaging and memorable and powerful presentations in my Presentation Skills Masterclass series. Again, watch that free training video linked below, because at the very, very, very end of it, after the training, I talk a little bit about it. All right, if you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss a future video. You hear all us YouTubers say it. But also share this video with someone you think might find this helpful. And again, if you want to improve your presentation skills, I am here for you. I will help. Sign up for that free training workshop to get started. The link, you know where it is, description below. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.